Good morning. My name is Sarah Fagan, and on behalf of the more than half of the 75 women here today and an additional 100 women who've signed letters in support of Brett Kavanaugh, thank you for taking the time to listen to our personal testimonies. I first met Brett when we were both working in the early days of the Bush administration. All told, I worked closely with him for 4 years. No matter the hour or assignment, Brett was always the same: thoughtful, detailed, and wise beyond his years. And whether you were male or female, white or black, an intern or the chief of staff, Brett was also always the same: respectful, responsive, and available. His character was consistent. Simply put, Brett was a great colleague. But Brett also became a close friend. Our friendship was forged on 9/11, the fateful day when many of my colleagues and I hastily left the White House after being told by a Secret Service agent to run as fast as we could. Within seconds, I was in a sea of strangers walking up 17th Street, scared and alone, with nothing in my pocket. I looked up, and there was Brett Kavanaugh. My colleague took care of me that day. He made sure I was safe, had food and money, and also made sure I got home safely that evening. The days after 9/11 in the White House were long and stressful, but Brett took the time to follow up with me and ensure I was doing okay. For me, running into Brett Kavanaugh that day was a gift. Most of the women on this podium have known Brett for decades. Some studied side by side with him in school or worked with him as young lawyers in Washington, or like me, worked with him in an administration, and yet others clerked for him on the DC Court of Appeals. While we've all crossed paths with Brett at different points of our lives and through different circumstances, when the women on this podium speak, you will hear a consistent theme. Brett is a person of honor, integrity, and a person of strong moral character. He is a good husband, a good father, and a good friend. He's been a strong mentor to many of us and a fair boss. Women from every phase of Judge Kavanaugh's life, those who know him best, have stepped forward to say that the allegation being leveled against him is false, and we are proud to stand with Brett.
Jennifer Mascott, she's a former law Judge Kavanaugh. She testified as a witness during Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings less than 2 weeks ago. She's known him and his family for 12 years. Jennifer, thank you for joining us. Your experience with Brett Kavanaugh stands in stark contrast to these allegations that you've heard.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Yes, I clerked for Judge Kavanaugh his first year on the D.C. Circuit from 2006 to 2007. As you've mentioned, I've known him and his family for 12 years. And I have to tell you that every moment that I have interacted with him, known his family, worked closely side by side as a law clerk to the judge, has acted with absolute integrity and character. He's been selfless. He's been fair-minded. He's been transparent. That's the approach that he's brought to the cases that he decided. Every one the year that I worked with him, he's remained a mentor, a career-long friend, someone that I deeply respect and am honored to know. And throughout the confirmation process, has had many statements of support from people of all walks of life, all along the spectrum. You saw many of them testify the day that I did, that Friday, at the Senate hearings, and I, of course, strongly support Judge Kavanaugh, have learned a lot from him and respect him a great deal.
So statements of support and character references are definitely important at a time like this. How do you sort of hold that in your head at the same time as this woman, Dr. Blasey Ford, who has come forward with an allegation? How do you square those?
Well, this is obviously a really tough set of circumstances, and as many have said, everyone should be treated with respect and dignity and heard concerns. Of course, I can tell you only what I know firsthand, and who I know firsthand is Judge Kavanaugh, and I can tell you that in my experience with Judge Kavanaugh, knowing him and his family for 12 years, he's always acted with the utmost character and integrity. It sounds like the Senate has made a decision about what it wants to do to proceed to hear from everyone and to have hearings on Monday, and Judge Kavanaugh looks forward to that opportunity as a chance to clear his name. He's flatly denied the allegations. They are flatly inconsistent with what I know of him, and speaking firsthand to that relationship for 12 years, I found him to be a tremendous public servant during that time.
Thank you. My name is Megan McCaleb. I'm not here today to speak about Brett Kavanaugh's qualifications to sit on the Supreme Court. No one disputes those impressive qualifications. Instead, I'm here to tell you about the Brett Kavanaugh I have known for 38 years, a man who was in high school and is to this day a gentleman of the highest caliber who always treated women with decency and respect. The acts of which Brett is accused represent a stark departure from the behavior my friends and I have witnessed for more than 4 decades. More than 6 of us, the girls who were his closest friends in high school and hung out with him virtually every weekend, had no choice but to stand up and say, "That's not the Brett I know." He stood out as the most responsible guy who treated us with kindness and respect. Let me tell you more about the Brett Kavanaugh I know. The Brett Kavanaugh I know is a man of both the highest intellect and humility. Brett was a serious and accomplished student who never spoke about himself. He was always more interested in you, and he deflected comments about himself. That was true when he was in high school, and it remains true today. The Brett Kavanaugh I know is a man who played sports in his youth and who loved going to sporting events with friends. We all went to Redskins and Orioles games growing up. In addition to parties and dances, he stood out for friendship, character, and loyalty. The Brett Kavanaugh I know dated my sister and some of my closest friends during high school and college, all of whom said that he treated them with nothing but total respect and decency, to the point where he remains close friends with them today. The Brett Kavanaugh I know is a faithful and wonderful husband to his wife, Ashley, a great dad to his 2 daughters, and he's a fabulous son to Ed and Judge Martha Kavanaugh, with whom he is very close. The Brett Kavanaugh I know is a dedicated coach of young girls, not only in basketball, but in life lessons that come from playing team sports, winning with humility, losing with grace, determination, perseverance, grit. I know this because he coaches my niece, and his impact on her has been immeasurable. The Brett Kavanaugh I know regularly serves food to the homeless and tutors underprivileged children. The Brett Kavanaugh I know was there when one of my closest friends lost her husband to ALS. And he invited my friend's daughter to the father-daughter dance that first year and every year since. The Brett Kavanaugh I know was days away from his confirmation hearing when my father passed away. Brett skipped his preparation to attend my dad's funeral, went and prepared all afternoon for his hearing, and then asked if he could stop by my house that night to chat with my mom and my family. Those of us who know Brett best, now and back in high school, know he's a man of honor, integrity, and compassion. He has always been a good person and is a true friend. Thank you.
Joining me right now is the group's chief counsel and policy director, Carrie Severino. Carrie, thanks for coming in.
Good to be here.
So the point of the ad campaign is quite clear. These women who know Kavanaugh are speaking to his character. But, Carrie, can any of these women speak to the specific allegation that has brought this all about, that has brought about this hearing that is supposed to happen on Monday? What Christine Blasey Ford says happened at that party 30 years ago?
No, that's the problem with the nature of these allegations. She says she makes this allegation. The 2 people she names in it both say it didn't happen. So but I think it is still important to have a sense of other women who knew him at the time and could say, was that characteristic of how Brett Kavanaugh comported himself in high school? And what we have are 65 women saying, no, that's not the Brett Kavanaugh we knew. Some of them even dated him. And you'd think if this was typical aggressive behavior on his part, they would have seen it. They said, no, that is not what we see. That's very consistent with the Brett Kavanaugh we knew and have known for decades. I think it's going to be important now to have this hearing. I hope Ms. Ford is willing to come to the hearing on Monday. It's not really clear whether she will yet, but we've had Senate Democrats have been calling for a hearing. I think it's Senator Grassley is trying to be as accommodating as possible. There's a week notice as required by the committee, and now I hope that we'll have an opportunity for both sides to tell their story. And Judge Kavanaugh says he's looking forward to being able to, in person and not just in his statements, unequivocally refute these allegations. When we talked to the women who were on that letter, they said, no, we actually heard about it right when everyone else was hearing about it, and we wanted to do something because we know Brett Kavanaugh, and we're concerned about his name being smeared in this way. So, I think insinuations only go so far, but the fact of the matter is these women do know him. And they said, I don't think, Kavanaugh says he didn't know about this until the allegation came out because he couldn't even imagine and speculate what it could have, who could have been claiming this, what they could have been claiming. So I think that's the same thing. So it's simply, the timing of this is really problematic. You had Senator Feinstein, who had these allegations for months, since July, did nothing to bring them up to the committee. Even there's lots of. She said out of respect. I know. There were lots of confidential ways she could do that. There's an entire closed session of the hearing for top, confidences like that, so that you don't have things turning into a circus like they did with the rest of the thing, with the sensitive kind of information. She didn't. That's why that procedure is in place for this kind of information. She chose not to bring it up over and over again. Either she didn't think they were credible or serious or relevant to this question of his confirmation, or she was holding them back for an intentional last-minute character smear. That's not fair to him or to her.
My name is Maura Fitzgerald. I've known Brett Kavanaugh since high school. I dated him briefly in college, and I've remained friends with him ever since. I want to make something clear, very, very clear. For me, this is not political. My being here has nothing to do with politics. I'm here because I felt it important to share my perspective on Brett's character and to talk about a man that I've known for over 35 years. The allegation against Brett is inconsistent with everything that I have known about him as a person. In both public and private, Brett treated me and everyone I know with respect. He has always been kind and good-natured. He has always been caring and concerned with the well-being of others. When I was in college and a close friend was in a coma after a car accident, Brett sent me a letter letting me know how sorry he was, writing that although he had never been in a similar situation, he could imagine the hurt that I was feeling. That was very typical of Brett, openly and unabashedly exhibiting care and compassion. And to my recollection, he was the only friend, male or female, who wrote a note to me after that terrible time. During the summers, my family would rent a beach house for a week with another family. It was a full house, but Brett was always welcome. He was polite and considerate to my siblings and to the parents. After his visits, he would express his thankfulness and appreciation to our parents. Brett was the kind of guy that you wanted to take home to meet your parents. Brett was then and still is a stand-up guy. Thank you.
Jennifer Mascott, assistant law professor at George Mason University. She also clerked for Judge Kavanaugh. And Jennifer, with a big welcome to you. First question, have you spoken with the judge recently? Do you know how he's taking these allegations?
Well, I can't, of course, speak to personal conversations that I've had with the judge, or really, but I clerked for him, as you mentioned, 12 years ago, and have known him and his family at that time, and he's acted with the utmost character integrity since I've known him, and he has categorically denied the allegations repeatedly, and I believe my understanding is, even back on Monday, talked with individuals associated with the Senate committee and categorically denied the allegations under possible penalty of perjury. Judge Kavanaugh, for his part, is categorically denied the allegations. He's had an impeccable record up to this point. From what I know of him, he has acted with utmost integrity and character during the 12 years that I've known him and his family. And so I think it's up to the Senate to fairly and handle both sides and hear from both sides.
Tell me about your experience as a clerk for him. What kind of a boss was he?
Sure. Well, as a law clerk, we're helping to look into cases with the judge. And as I testified on his support in the Senate, I spoke about his approach in every case, trying to look at all relevant laws, trying to keep an open mind in every case, be independent, even-handed, and fair-minded. And he was quite precise, wanting to know all of the relevant arguments, be very careful in how he drafted opinions. And so I had just a wonderful experience learning about the law from him, and also having him as a mentor and a friend for many years since that time.
You mentioned that you vouched for Judge Kavanaugh's character. In fact, you were the final witness for him to testify at his hearing. But overall, what do you make of the process? Do you think it is proceeding fairly?
Well, I think that the Senate's trying to move ahead fairly, and I believe that the committee released a statement yesterday about trying to accommodate some of the requests that have been made, and is currently in negotiations. And we'll see if Dr. Ford is willing to come in and testify with how things stand right now. But obviously, these are it's a very, very challenging set of circumstances. Judge Kavanaugh's categorically denied the accusations. I think the Senate's going to try to work together to figure out how to proceed.
Do you, Jennifer, think it's fair for the Senate to essentially change protocol and bring in another lawyer to question Dr. Ford?
Well, I'm not sure I would characterize that as changing protocol. I mean, my recollection, first thing that comes to mind is I believe back in the Iran-Contra hearings, for example, there was outside counsel brought in. And so the Senate will have to decide how best to proceed, obviously. But it does not surprise me that in trying to make sure that this is fair and doesn't seem like it's just political and that it's thorough, that they would want to bring in somebody with expertise specifically in investigating and asking questions of both parties.
My name is Kathy Martin. I've known Brett for more than 2 decades, both as a close personal friend and a White House colleague. Brett is one of the most decent, honorable, and good-hearted people I know. He is a man of high integrity and character. I have never seen him be anything but a true gentleman in all aspects of his life. I first met Brett in 1997 when we were young lawyers in D.C. We socialized in some of the same circles. He was single at the time and dated a couple good friends of mine, who to this day still count him as a very close friend. I later worked with Brett in the White House, where I saw him mentor young lawyers in the counsel's office and empower young White House staffers, many of whom were women. In the weeks and months after 9/11, when tensions often ran high, Brett had a natural ability to navigate choppy waters, to find consensus without ever losing his cool. He was the guy who stood up for the staffer who made the mistake and then quietly explained to him or her how to avoid the mistake the next time. As staff secretary, Brett often interacted with the most senior and sometimes the most junior staffers. He treated everyone with the same level of respect, decorum, and professionalism. Today, my husband Kevin and I count Brett and his wife Ashley among our closest family friends. We had our first children months apart, and we have shared the joys and challenges of parenting. We've celebrated our children's birthdays together and mourned the loss of family members. We've cheered for our kids' basketball and hockey teams. Brett taught my boys to play baseball with a plastic bat in his backyard. And when my daughter came along, he taught her that she could play baseball too. Brett is one of the best dads I know, present and available, a model for teaching what is right and good. Brett has the moral compass, integrity, and humility that I hope my 2 young sons grow up to have. I am here today because I know Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh is a good man who is incapable of mistreating anyone. I am here today because I stand with Brett.
So as promised, joining me now exclusively are 2 of the 65 women who signed a letter vouching for Judge Kavanaugh's good character. Maura Fitzgerald, a good friend, dated Kavanaugh for a while in high school. And Maura Kane, who has known him since high school, they dated in college and remain friends. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you here tonight. Maura Fitzgerald, let me start with you. When you heard this account, when you read what this accuser is saying, what went through your mind? What was your reaction?
I was absolutely shocked. I just couldn't believe it. It's just so polar opposite of the Brett Kavanaugh that I've known for over 35 years. I was confused, surprised, shocked, and I still can't believe it.
Maura Kane, what was your reaction?
The very same. I couldn't believe that these allegations had come out when I had been at the hearings for a couple of days, and we just watched woman after woman come forward praising Brett and his respect for women and his professionalism and his kindness towards them. And then this at the last minute came out. I was equally shocked.
Maura Fitzgerald, all of this is, this hearing that's going to happen a week from Monday. This accuser will speak. He will speak. We've all seen this before. It reminds, I think, many of us of the Anita Hill situation. So there's going to be a lot of delicate questions. And one of the questions is going to go to whether or not he was someone who drank heavily in high school and could have potentially blacked out this entire experience. Maura Fitzgerald, is that a possibility?
No, and all of the times, all the years that I've known Brett, even if we had a beer, he was always in complete control. And he was actually one of the guys that if we were at a social gathering, he'd be the guy to look out for other people. He was always in control.
So, Maura Kane, they've already dredged up, things that were written in high school yearbooks. He talks about something about kegs and, some liquor reference. A lot of people write those kind of things in high school yearbooks. But tell me your recollection. Did you ever see him, out of control, drunk, in a situation where he might not have remembered what he was doing?
No, not at all. We did drink beer in high school. Back then, the drinking age in Washington was 18.
You never saw him drink a beer in high school ever?
No, we did. Yeah, we did.
You did?
No,
I thought you said you didn't.
Drink beer.
Okay, just to be clear.
No, we drank beer. It was legal, so we did drink beer. But I never saw him out of control, drunk. He always retained his composure. He was a responsible guy. He was someone who did have a beer, but he was never out of control. He never became someone different after drinking.
Maura Fitzgerald, did you know this woman? You both went to the same high school. He went to sort of the brother high school to that, Georgetown Prep. She went to a different high school. Do you know this woman, Christine Blasey Ford?
I do not, and I actually don't even recognize the name.
What about you, Maura Kane? Any recollection at all of ever seeing her at any party?
Yes, I did know who she was. I had seen her at parties. She went to a different school, but I knew who she was, but I did not know her well. We were not friends. I just knew who she was.
All right. And you both dated him. I'm sure he dated several people. Most people do through high school and college. So Maura Fitzgerald, was he ever physically aggressive to you? What was he like as a boyfriend?
No, he was nothing but kind and polite and respectful. I've known him since high school. I dated him briefly in college, and we've remained close friends ever since. I cherish his friendship. He has just been such a stand-up guy, full of integrity. I admire him. He never exhibited to me or anyone else that I know, not with anything, treated no one with disrespect.
Do either of you know the other friend who was supposedly with him that night, Mr. Judge?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you both know him. Do you have any recollection of this party?
No.
No.
I don't know anything about the party.
A party at a pool house, somewhere near the club where everybody used to hang out. No recollection of that night?
No. I'd never heard of anything about that party until this week.
Okay. In terms of the letter that you signed, there's a lot of buzz today about the fact that so far you're the only two who want to step forward and stand by the letter that you wrote. What can you say about that? Let me start with you, Maura Fitzgerald.
That is actually not true. I've seen a lot of that in the media, but of all the girls that I've been in touch with about the letter who have signed the letter, they stand by it. They have been just trying to avoid all the calls from the media, but they do stand by the letter.
Maura Kane?
Yeah, the very same. Everyone stands by the letter. They're just not going out into the media and being so, we've put it out there and everyone's supporting Brett, but following that, no one is retracting their support. They're just avoiding the media frenzy.
Maura Fitzgerald, are you concerned? Obviously we live in this Me Too era, and it can be very difficult for both sides to get a fair hearing in this. Are you concerned that your friend, Judge Kavanaugh, might not get that?
Well, I'm concerned for Brett. I just think this is a travesty. But, in all the years that I've known him, like I said, over 35 years, he has been nothing but honest and trustworthy and respectful. And I know he'll continue to be that way.
Maureen, final word?
I'm concerned that this is even happening at this stage in his hearing after, he went through so much. But he is smart and he's telling the truth, and I think in the end it'll be all right.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Cox Kaplan. I didn't grow up around here. I grew up in Rising Star, Texas. That's just a few miles down the road from where Brett's wife, Ashley, my dear friend, grew up. My husband, Joel, and I have been friends with Brett and Ashley Kavanaugh from the early days of the George W. Bush administration and well before the four of us were married. For more than 15 years, we've shared life's victories and its heartaches, the highs and lows, everything from Brett's basketball team's wins and losses to the roller coaster roster of his beloved Washington Nationals. We've shared our kids' bicycle crashes, their skinned knees, their broken bones. We share our families. We spend birthdays and holidays together, and we have for years and years. There are no two people who are more humble, more honorable, more generous, or more gracious, and in Brett's case, more qualified to serve this country in the role for which he has been nominated. And while Brett is the person who's been nominated, his family is going through this process too. My dear friend Ashley and her precious girls, Margaret and Liza, who I love. I am heartbroken over the way that this precious family has been treated. What saddens me the most is the fact that I know this person, Brett Kavanaugh, to be a person of the highest moral character and integrity. Someone who is humble, who puts others before himself, and someone who is beyond well qualified for the position of the U.S. Supreme Court. Brett is an extraordinary person, as you have heard all of us testify to, but he's also a real person. He's the one who's at neighborhood barbecues, and he likes sports, and he coaches basketball, as you've heard us talk about. He goes to church. He does all the things that we do, including working to set a good example for his children, his family, and his community. But honestly, he does those things better than most of us, with more dedication and more humility. This is the person that I know. This is the person who is an honorable husband and father and dedicated public servant. The nomination process should be one that weeds out those who are not qualified or suited to serve. Sadly, this process isn't. It seems anyone can launch an allegation without corroboration or evidence and dismantle a person's career and their life and the lives of their family members. This is wrong. I stand before you today as someone who spends much of my time working with women to help them succeed and build their careers. And I am so proud that Brett has worked to foster an environment in his office that empowers and supports young women lawyers as they embark on their careers. Maybe he does this because he's the father of 2 young daughters. But more likely, he does it because he knows it's the right thing to do. It would have been a lot easier not to come here today. This is not particularly fun. But it wouldn't have been right. And it wouldn't have been what Brett would have done. He sets a high bar as a friend, and as an example for others. I have close friends on both sides of the political aisle. I happen to be a Republican, but that is not why I am here before you today. I'm here as the mother of 2 young children. They also believe in Brett Kavanaugh and love him. I am a patriotic American, and I'm here as the friend of someone who is highly deserving of the position for which he has been nominated. Our country simply cannot do better. Thank you.
I think this is something that, at a minimum, the Democrats and the Senate Judiciary Committee seem to be working with. So but it certainly is continuing to make good on Schumer's promise for this whole process. This is something that, as a united group, they're saying that we have to do this, and in many cases for pure political reasons of I want to drive out the base kind of questions. That this isn't what the way that we should be evaluating judicial nominees with uncorroborated, decades-old allegations coming out at the last minute. It's dirty politics. This is not this is not fair to our public servants, and it's not good for our public discourse either. If they thought her story, if they thought her story was credible and was irrelevant to this, they should have been investigating it back in July. And that's so. From the Democrats themselves are not treating this as a serious investigation. They're treating it as a political pawn. Senator Durbin, for example, from his statement yesterday, it sounds like he had these for over a week, didn't do anything, didn't ask. They had opportunities to mention it in the hearing, in the committee meetings. Submit questions for the record to Kavanaugh. He chose not to. He waited to hold it to the end.
I'm Jen Mascott. I served as a law clerk to Judge Kavanaugh from 2006 to 2007 during his first year on the bench. And from the time that I met Judge Kavanaugh more than 12 years ago, I've known him to be a person of the highest integrity and character. He's kind and generous, honorable and transparent. Throughout the 12 years that I've known the judge and his family, he's been a mentor and a friend. He's humble, he's fair, he serves his community, and routinely puts the interest of others ahead of himself. Judge Kavanaugh has had an impeccable record. Throughout the confirmation process, women and men from throughout his life and career have attested to his character, his integrity, and his service. Co-workers, students, academic colleagues, law clerks, and friends from across the political spectrum have attested to Judge Kavanaugh's credentials and character. The judge that I have known for 12 years is a dedicated public servant who faithfully applies the law in his work deciding cases and works toward the good of society in his time as a mentor, teacher, neighbor, and dad. During the year that I clerked for Judge Kavanaugh, he consistently applied the law in an even-handed and fair-minded way, with integrity. These allegations are inconsistent with everything I know about Judge Kavanaugh. I deeply respect and admire Judge and Mrs. Kavanaugh, and I'm thankful to have the judge as my mentor and as my friend.
He's been subject to a sustained campaign, public smear campaign against him for the last 2 weeks. I think what we're seeing here is the initial Ford allegations are unraveling before our eyes. Now we have every single other person who was alleged to be at this event saying it didn't happen. Her friend even saying, didn't even know Brett Kavanaugh. This didn't happen at all. Now his calendars have come out from the time showing that he was out of the area for most of the time that this kind of vaguely timed allegation took place. So it seems even less likely. Now the Democrats are going crazy trying to find something else they can do. And I got to disagree with Jeff. This allegation is even less credible. You have a woman who initially, when she talked to the New Yorker, couldn't even be sure that Kavanaugh was there. And then only after 6 days of coaching with her lawyer decided maybe he was. Everyone she alleged was there also says it didn't happen. So the parallel I see between these is you have an accuser here who, for whatever reason, has a story that absolutely doesn't line up with everyone they claim should be there to corroborate. This is just now a smear campaign on steroids.